Persona 5 Royale absolutely nails many of the things it does, and I think for a lot of people it would not be a stretch to say that it is one of the best JRPGs around, if not the best. The game has an absolutely kick-ass soundtrack. It is easily the most stylish game I have ever had the pleasure to play. Great voice acting even on English dubs. What? Which I know usually people have a problem with. Incredible turn-based combat, well, the list goes on. And honestly, all of this applies to the base game as well. When Royale was released, the game went up to a whole new level by adding new quality of life improvements, like the absence of Mom Gunna, for example, thankfully. We also got new soundtracks, new teammates, new lots of things. But the main addition was that of a new Last Palace. And this, I feel, is what Persona 5 Royale did best, and that deserves to be talked about way more often than it is. Not that it isn't talked about, mind you. It is, I just would rather it be talked about even more than it already is. To be specific, the addition that deserves all the praise in the world is that of the new antagonist for the game. I played Persona 5 Royale for the first time when it came out. When I finished the game, I got that nagging emptiness that comes when you finish something that truly resonates with you. Be it a book, a game, a movie, anything. You know the feeling. But while the feeling did eventually leave me, my admiration for the storyline and its antagonist did not. And as such, when the Steam release came out, I played Royale again, just to re-experience the masterpiece that is the third semester. And even now, after having just finished the game again, I find myself still just as impressed as I was years ago. To me, this antagonist is one of, if not the best in any video game ever, and I do not say that lightly. This is why I'd like to spend the next half an hour, give or take like 20 minutes, because I have no idea how long this video will actually be, explaining why I think this is the case. But before we continue, I need to warn you that you are about to get spoiled in what perhaps is this game's biggest revelation. Well, kinda. I know many of you may see it coming and saw it coming when you were playing the game. I know I did, kinda. But still, it's worth going into this game as unspoiled as possible. So, if you haven't played Persona 5 Royale, please just stop watching, play it, and come back after the 120 or so hours it'll take you to finish the game. Well, just don't forget this video exists. And if you're still here, I'll assume you either finished the game or you don't care about spoilers, you mad lads, so here we go! I'm sure those of you who played the game knew who I wanted to talk about before even clicking the video, but I'll say it anyway. The silhouette in the thumbnail is, drumroll please, Dr. Takuto Maruki. This is the name of the man that I consider to be one of the best antagonists in gaming. And oh boy, let me tell you, there is a laundry list of reasons why. I like to start my videos, however, with some context, so here's a brief history of your time with Maruki. If you remember everything, honestly, I recommend you just save yourself some time and skip the section in the timestamp in the description or in the video itself. But if you don't remember, well, here we go. After changing Kamoshida's heart as your first target, he confesses to all his crimes and gets locked up. Cool, right? The school, in full damage control mode, brings in a goofy, lovable, and, according to the girls in the audience, hot counselor, Dr. Maruki.
Isn't he hot?
His goal is to be available to any students who wish to talk through their issues. Those more closely involved with Kamoshida, such as the main cast, are obligated to talk to him. You will accept help whether or not you want it, damn it! Although, to be honest, the guy offers us snacks and raises our max SP after each encounter, so I would have done his confident path to the end no matter what. SP is like super valuable in this game, and I can't say no to free food as well. I mean, who can, right?
There's also snacks. All right, enough with the snacks.
Upon first talking to him, he asks to make a deal with you. You let him bounce ideas off of you for his research, and in turn he teaches you valuable mental focus skills, which end up being the SP increase and some in-battle support skills. Honestly, I feel like I could just leave this video with saying this is why he's the best antagonist ever, because he really helps you, and that's already enough. So honestly, his skills are really freaking useful. But nah, this isn't even the tip of the iceberg. In fact, these are his qualities as an ally, not an antagonist, and I'm going all in on the antagonist angle, so bear with me. Throughout the 2 school semesters, you learn quite a bit about him. You learn he had a girlfriend who he broke up with. You learn he's studying cognitive science, not to be confused with science. You learn that he views reality as too harsh and cruel sometimes. You learn his funding was cut off for his research. You learn, well, a lot, really. Maruki becomes a friend, much like most of Joker's other confidants. And by the apparent end of his tale, he is overjoyed. Thanks to your contribution, he finishes his research into cognitive science, not to be confused with science. He even reveals he knows you're the Phantom Thieves, and this is why he chose us to bounce ideas from. I mean, who better to do so than a person who literally knows the very cognitive world he's attempting to study, right? But then he leaves. His time at school is over and nobody's willing to work for free, so off he goes. Can't say I blame him. The kids take down a corrupt politician, then the real world merges with a cognitive world, blood rains from the sky, people start disappearing, bones or whatever those are crop up everywhere. We beat down a misbehaving god who wishes to control the masses.
Foolish humans are praying down there.
You know, all in a day's work. And then it's over. Metaverse is gone, and we, as the leader of the Phantom Thieves, need to turn ourselves into the police so they can have proof that Shido did commit the crimes he was confessing to. But then, a miracle happens. Akechi, the ace detective psychopath presumed dead, shows up and offers to take Joker's place. And then the year rolls over, as this was over Christmas, and another miracle happens. Akechi is released from jail with no explanation. And that's just the beginning.
Yes, I was acquitted of all charges. It's absolutely preposterous.
Suddenly, miracles are happening all over. Papa's mom is back to the world of living, and so is Haru's dad. Ryuji is on the track team again. Yusuke has a loving mentor who cherishes Sayuri as much as he does. The list goes on. Oh yeah, and Mona is a human now. Yes, that's a tiny change that I forgot to mention. So, yeah, miracles. Joker's naturally super confused, just as the player is at this point, when Akechi arrives to talk to him. Both of them remember how things are meant to be and decide to investigate. Their investigation takes them to the Odaiba Palace that Joker and Violet stumbled upon last year, and both of them, along with Violet, enter the palace. Soon they find themselves face to face with the ruler, which is none other than Maruki. His goal is to make every single person in the world happy. To create a perfect reality in which nobody suffers. Sounds crazy, right? Well, turns out he does have that power, as seen not only by your friends, but also by Violet herself. The girl you've known your entire game as Kazumi Yoshizawa is actually Sumire Yoshizawa, who felt responsible for her sister Kazumi's death. Her pain was so big that she wished to be Kazumi so that her dreams could still come true. A wish that Maruki was all too happy to grant by changing her cognition so she thinks she's Kazumi. He reminds Sumire of all this, and her pain is again too much to bear, and she chooses to be Kazumi again. So Maruki holds her hostage and sends Akechi and the protagonist, who I'll now call Ren, away for a week. During this week, Ren convinces his teammates to think about how things are too perfect. And on their visit back to the palace, every one of the Phantom Thieves come to their senses and join Akechi and Ren.
I don't think so.
They get Sumiri back, who starts accepting the truth about herself. Side note here, even though this video is not about Sumiri, I just want to say that I found it brilliant how her confidence was locked to rank 5 until she accepted the truth about herself. After all, if a confident ranking signifies trust and how much you both know each other, how can it ever get to max, aka rank 10, if the person you're confiding in is hiding such a major part of themselves? Anyway, we get the choice to reject or accept Maruki's reality. Accept it and the game ends on a 15-minute sequence. Reject it and the fight continues. Lavenza tells the team a bunch of things, like the fact that Maruki got his powers amplified by the god that controls defeat, and the most important bit, that the Phantom Thieves have 1 month to get rid of the palace before Maruki's reality becomes, you know, the real reality. So it's off to work for our honest thieves. Maruki's palace, called either Center of Melancholy or Laboratory of Sorrow, is a pretty nifty addition to the game. I found the puzzles quite refreshing, especially that whole bit about evaluating your psyche by choosing answers to hypothetical situations. You know, the one that's showing on camera right now. You quickly work your way through, finding tapes that reveal Maruki's past to you. We see him talking to a PTSD-ridden girlfriend of his, Rumi, before Sorsa awakening his persona and rewriting her cognition of her entire life, healing her from the trauma but making her forget his existence in the process.
Must seek me.
We see him talking to a friend about having his research grant pulled. We see Sumiri's cognition being rewritten for the first time. And last, we see him fully awakening to his persona at the very day mementos and reality became one. Finally, we get to the end of the palace and wait for the day before the deadline in hopes that Maruki will come talk to us. After all, since he is a persona user, he has no shadow version of himself in the palace. Rather, he is in direct control, and if he doesn't want you, he will not be seen by us. Like clockwork though, the day before the change is made permanent, Maruki shows up to talk to Joker. He still wants us to accept his new reality and even reveals that Akechi is meant to be dead and is only there because that is Ren's wish. Yet, we do not falter in our convictions and give Maruki the calling card.
Ah, that's right.
The final fight is honestly incredible. His persona, Azathoth, is a tough cookie to break, requiring the use of all your strategies learned so far. And don't even get me started on the absurdity that is Adam Kadmon, his second persona awakened when he loses the first fight. And then, when all is said and done, Maruki forces Joker into one last 1v1.
I gave up everything! Everything! So why?
No personas, just a high school student exchanging blows with his therapist. Imagine the headlines on the papers for that one. And then, after that, Maruki finally loses, and we rescue him from the crumbling palace. At the end of the game, as Joker is going to the train station to return home, Maruki offers him a ride in his cab, saying that it's never too late to start over. Whew! Those were 2 whole pages of context, and naturally it's the bare minimum of the incredible adventure of Takuto Maruki. I think one thing is clear though, and that's actually my very first point I want to make in regards to Maruki being an incredible antagonist. We have a very deep personal connection to him. Sure, our character is connected to Shido and somewhat connected to Kamoshida, but this is different. Our relationship with those 2 that I just mentioned was based on hatred, mostly on their part, from the get-go. With Maruki, that's not really the case. We see him trying to help out not only us, but every single one of the Phantom Thieves. Even Yusuke and Futaba, who are not even part of the school he's employed by. Not only that, but we make him into the antagonist he is. I'm sure you know, but the way that you actually unlock the game's final arc, the 3rd semester, is by getting Maruki a level 10. before you get to the end of the original Persona 5. Remember how I said that you help him finish his research? Well, at rank 10 he finally does it. And he says multiple times that he could not have done it without Joker. Without us. Without the player.
I've mentioned this before, but still, this is truly thanks to you. Had you not shared your experience and insights with me, this paper never would have been completed.
So, through our experiences as the Phantom Thieves, we give him the missing pieces he needed to get the ball rolling on his world-altering plan. And there's more. Maruki never, not once, stops feeling like a friend who has just lost his way. Notice that he never displays anger towards us. Even when he's screaming after he lost everything at the end, it doesn't really feel like he's screaming at us, but rather just letting out his pain and frustration. Pain and frustration that he spent years running from, hiding behind the research in hopes to eradicate pain from the world. At the end of the day, Maruki helped us a lot. He gave us tons of food, like 50 extra SP, which is enough to use like one big skill, and even some funny moments. And keep in mind, this is a 100-hour plus game, so all of this is done gradually and really well. While it's far from being perfect, it's incredibly different from the actual villains of Persona 5. And note that I am not including Futaba and Sai in the villains group, even though they have a palace. So, do you see how this has personal stakes? Over the course of the game, we changed this man's life without changing his heart. Thanks to us, and only us, his life goal was achieved. In turn, he helped us a lot in our own missions. It's rare for a game to make it so you build up your last antagonist, and even rarer for it to be done this well. And honestly, it's personal for Maruki as well. This is the second point I wanted to get into, and I cannot stress this enough. If Maruki wanted to beat us, we would have been beaten. It's just that simple. Remember how the Phantom Thieves had to wait for the very last day before Maruki's reality became the new reality to send him a calling card? Well, this is because they physically had no way to reach Maruki. He had control over his own palace and was deep within it atop a tree to which there was no path. Akechi himself proposes the plan of waiting because, knowing Maruki, he would try one last time to change the Phantom Thieves' minds, and that he would likely attempt to do so via Joker. And in fact, that's precisely what happens. Joker gets a call from Maruki saying he wishes to talk, and he even adds that if the Phantom Thieves do wish to take a stand against him, they had to give him something, referring obviously to the calling card. Not only that, but Maruki already rewrote the cognition of all Phantom Thieves minus Joker and Akechi once, and I really don't see why he couldn't do it again if he wanted to. And even at the end, Maruki opens up the tree path so that Joker and the thieves can reach him for the final fight. At this point, you might be wondering, why? If his goal truly is to rewrite reality, why open himself to this danger? The answer is not that simple, but part of the reason is that it's because this is personal for Maruki. He tells Joker, even on their final encounter, that he is incredibly grateful to him for everything that he did, and that he really wants them to see eye to eye. Since Maruki himself is unwilling to change his views even a bit, his hope is to get the Phantom Thieves, and specifically Joker, to see things his way. This is really important to Maruki. At the same time, the personal aspect is definitely not the only one that influences his attitude. I think deep down, some part of him wants to leave the door open to be proven wrong, even if he doesn't outright say so. After all, in the last day, when it was clear Joker and the others would not accept his reality, the safest move would have been to just not open the stairway leading up to the tree like he did.
Come on up.
He invited them up to fight. Maybe it was out of selfish reasons, such as wanting to change Joker's mind one way or another, but I doubt it. He did, after all, live with these kids for months, and he saw what they accomplished as the Phantom Thieves. There had to have been at least a sliver of hope for a third path that neither side was seeing. Plus, it's fair to assume that he wants to give the thieves a chance to achieve their own dreams and fight back. Dr. Mariki is not evil, after all. And since I mentioned the word evil, this is probably a great moment to talk about the difference between an antagonist and a villain. Cambridge Dictionary defines the word as a bad person who harms other people or breaks the law. Effectively, a criminal of sorts. Think, again, Kamoshida and Shido with goals that I'm certain no one can empathize with. Well, I guess one of you could, but I'd be very worried for that person. An antagonist, however, is very different from a villain. It's the person that is strongly opposed to something or someone. This is why I've been taking great care to call Mariki an antagonist. His ideals are, at least if we take him at his word, pure. He wants to do good, but the way he does so is in direct opposition to our protagonists, making him an antagonist, but not a villain. And in an interesting shift of perspectives, Joker and the Phantom Thieves are the antagonists to Maruki's story. Funny how these things go, huh? And this is yet another aspect that makes him brilliant. His goals are actually commendable. Take a look at discussion threads on sites like Reddit, and you will always find people who would take Maruki up on his offer to live in a perfect reality controlled by him in a heartbeat. That's because, quite frankly, what he offers sounds like a dream. A world in which you're not hurt, in which there's no pain, no suffering, a world in which people can just be happy. Like I said, crazy, right? And at the same time, insanely tempting. Hell, when you actually do take him up on this offer, you get a bad ending that can hardly even be called a bad ending. Everyone's happy. People were celebrating at Sojiro's cafe. Akechi is alive. All is well. Even if in this final picture, Akechi and Joker are giving a knowing look at the camera. The motivation to erase pain is not exactly unheard of, but I've never seen it applied this well. We are talking about a character who actually has the means to pull it off, and some would argue that he can do that without any bad consequences. By all means, it's a noble goal, but a terribly flawed one in its execution. First of all, we as humans need pain. Pain is not just bad. One of the very first things that Maruki asks Joker is about the pain of heartbreak. Is that good? And honestly, I think it is. It shows you how deeply you cared for the person. If someone dumps you and you feel nothing but joy, can you even say you love them? I just don't see it. Plus, pain teaches us to be better, more cautious, more experienced, everything. Let's assume, however, for the sake of argument, that Maruki's reality got rid of all those uses for pain. You gain experience and caution from, I don't know, divine intervention. Heartbreak gives you a new feeling that is not painful but still shows how deeply you cared. He can technically do all these things, by the way, since, you know, he can rewrite reality itself. But even then, this would still be a flawed idea, because it takes away a very basic part of human nature. Free will. Suppose, for example, that I'm in love with a woman. She, however, is monogamous and in love with another guy. How does Maruki handle that? Does he change her preference so that she is now polyamorous and just wants both guys? Does he change my feelings despite me actually appreciating them? And the point that Mona himself actually raises at the end of the game?
You know, there probably are plenty of people who'd ultimately benefit from your reality. But what about the people who want to take on the world themselves? How's it right to rob them of their opportunities?
What about those of us who want to feel pain? Who wish to face our challenges instead of having them just never existing in the first place? These people have their choice made for them. And at this point, is Maruki really better than the God of Control who wished to have the masses do their bidding? You could still argue that a person would never even know that they had these desires to begin with, and that's a valid point. They would, you know, think they have their free will, but to me that's just masking the problem. Their free will was taken, regardless of whether or not they know it. But to them, who would have no clue, perhaps none of this matters. And as such, perhaps it doesn't matter to you who's listening to this either. And I think that's the magic behind Maruki's motivations. They are inherently flawed, but for a lot of people, they just work. For some people, reality really is way too harsh to face. These folks would gladly give up their free will and just live under someone else's control if it meant they were happy and blissfully unaware. And honestly, sometimes I find myself in that group too. Life would just be a lot easier. But, you know, I always come to my senses. At the end of the day, this approach is just running from my problems and I'm done doing that in my life. But I can't say I blame those who aren't. I've been in your shoes before and someday I might be again. I don't know. But the Phantom Thieves are not amongst the folks who would choose Maruki's reality, and so we end up head-to-head against a good therapist. And let me tell you, what an amazing fight that was. I feel like there were two main moments in which Persona 5 Royale tried to test your skills in a comprehensive way. The first was during Okumura's fights. Each batch of enemies had the same weakness and had to be eliminated at the same time, else the round would restart. This posed a really big issue given that the fight was timed. I'll be honest, this was a major pain in the butt. To me, this fight was absolutely the wrong way to test your skills for reasons such as relying on specific single elements every time, with a harsh penalty for not getting all 4 enemies at once. Maruki's fight, however, was the second and by far most comprehensive test of accumulated skills, and in my opinion, this one was done right. In Phase 1 specifically, we fight him and his persona, Azathoth. Each tentacle that comes out of the ground does something different, like buffing or shielding Maruki from damage. Similarly, each tentacle has different weaknesses and resistances. While there is no harsh penalty for not getting all tentacles in the same turn, like an eventual game over due to running out of time in the fights, you are incentivized to do so, because they will end up strengthening Maruki and making the fight harder. As such, the baton pass mechanic really comes in clutch here. When you execute the fight right, you swap between nearly all your 4 characters, getting +1s on the tentacles before executing a devastating attack with your last character, especially if you leveled up your baton pass. Not only that, but you're incentivized to swap characters in and out and use your items because Maruki blocks actions. Did your ability to use magic get blocked? Well, it might be a good idea to bring in heavy physical attackers like Ryuji or use elemental items. You know, those little give 50 nuke damage to this character if you use it. I barely ever used it, but man, they were useful in this fight, let me tell you. Unable to use support skills? Well, better prepare to toss some stat-raising items at your party. Quite frankly, this whole fight is brilliant. Stage 2 is slightly less so, but the spectacle does make it worth it. And speaking of Stage 1 and 2, how could I not fanboy over how fitting Maruki's very personas are? His first persona is literally Azathoth, which is an eldritch entity described as the blind idiot god, lord of all things. He is also described as being able to lull dancers by the thin, monotonous piping of a demonic flute. That was a literal quote, by the way. So, how fitting is it for a god considered the ultimate chaos, able to attract mindless people, to be the one behind a mass change of cognition? A mass attraction of people to a perfect reality in which Maruki and Azathoth are at the very center, just like the real Azathoth. And then, the god gets defeated. Maruki is down. But his will is so strong that it perseveres. His palace is crumbling, his work is in shambles, and yet he is not done. Suddenly, Azathoth is no more, and Adam Kadmon takes its place. According to the Persona Wiki, Adam Kadmon is the original man in the teachings of the Kabbalah. Hope I pronounced that correctly. It is untainted by earthly matter, and is the very perfect prototype man. Eventually, he came to even personify a messiah. And isn't that precisely how Maruki needs to be to achieve his goal? He sees himself as the one chosen to guide everyone into this new paradise. Literally a messiah, a perfect man amongst all of us, seeking to make sure everyone else is perfect too. He may not see himself as such to this extent, mind you, but his goal is nothing short of a messiah's goal or savior's goal. So, the personas are incredibly well-fitting, and I absolutely love that fact. I know that's the case for every persona, but we're talking about Maruki here, so, you know, I had to bring the topic up in this specific light. But you think the attention to detail in this wonderfully crafted antagonist ends in this pair of personas? Oh, no, no, no. Wait until you hear about the soundtrack. Oh, the soundtrack. You first enter Maruki's palace in the second semester, after Yoshizawa accidentally slipped in there. I still remember to this day how I felt when I first stepped foot in there. And the reason why I remember it so vividly is because I stopped moving. I had to stop moving. Gentle Madman started playing, and I was just so in love with the melody that I was simply too afraid of triggering a cutscene and ending it. Have a bit of a listen yourself. Oh, and since we're in this footage, just a quick curiosity. By this point, lots of you had probably already figured out who this palace belonged to, but if not, it has lots of little hints towards Maruki. Take a look at the pamphlets, for example, which all talk about happiness cognitive science research. Maruki was basically the only character in the game focused on this specific subject, so huge hint right there, and there's more. But anyway, back to the soundtrack. Aside from the palace theme being absolutely beautiful, the name also fits the owner very well. Gentle Madman. Does this not perfectly describe Maruki? He is gentle, but if you ask me, the task he set for himself is so insane it may very well be the work of a madman. And then we get to the other tracks that play in his palace in semester number 3. I'll focus on 3 others. Throw Away Your Mask, I Believe, and Swear to My Bones. At the final sequence, the first of those that we hear is I Believe, but honestly, this and Throw Away Your Mask both play almost in an alternating fashion with one another. This makes sense because it wouldn't be a stretch to say that they are the Phantom Thieves and Maruki's themes, respectively. These songs are so wonderfully different and antagonistic to one another that it's almost hard to see them as separate entities, as contradictory as that might sound. In I Believe, we see the Phantom Thieves as answers. I highly recommend you going to read the lyrics yourselves, but here's some highlights. Quote, "It's time to bring an end to the question of who will win. It's us." End quote. Showing not only that they are multiple people by the usage of the plural there, but also their determination to stand up to the reality imposed upon them. Quote, "Off the road we have to go, the roadless path we shall proceed until the end of our roles." End quote. Again, this is their answer to Maruki. They don't want a path given to them, but rather they want to find their own way. And last but not least, the future which we fully believe it's not given to us, it's earned. Do I even need to explain this one? On the other side of the same coin, we have Throw Away Your Mask. Again, I highly recommend reading the lyrics yourself, but I will highlight some verses. Quote, "Don't sleep through dreams that can come true. No more tears shall drop from your cheeks anymore." End quote. This one represents that you won't suffer for your dreams anymore, and you won't have to give them up. Quote, "Believe in me that you don't need to suffer from anything." End quote. Again, Maruki asking everyone to believe in his ability to give them a happy life, free of suffering. Quote, "You can throw your mask away, no more pretending." End quote. And perhaps we reach the biggest symbolism of the game here, the masks. For Maruki, they conceal not only a person's identity, but also their pain. His job as a therapist has allowed him to see and understand many people who carry on as if they're okay, while suffering a lot by themselves. This is his ultimate goal, for people to no longer need a mask, to no longer need to pretend to be fine, because they will no longer be in pain. Both songs have many more verses to analyze, but I feel like this video is already long enough as it is. The bottom line here is that the soundtrack doesn't just sound incredibly good, but it also tells a vital part of the storyline, which is something lots of people won't ever notice. But I think perhaps the biggest, and at the same time most hidden tell in these songs, is the track called Swear to My Bones. This isn't a new song to Persona 5 Royale unlike the others on this list. Oh no. This has been in the game since vanilla. I'll play a bit of it here. Do you remember when it plays? It feels sad when a teammate's about to have their personas evolved. You are right. In that context, the song represents the moment a person resolves their inner turmoil, understands themselves better, and is able to achieve new heights of personal growth because of it. And funnily enough, this song also plays in Maruki's palace. Remember when? It was right here, in this bit of the game, as you're fighting him with your bare fists. Do you remember what he says? If not, here you go.
Help me kill every last one of my regrets. You're the only one I can ask to help me with this. The disappearance of my palace, of the entire metaverse, is drawing near. Seems like neither of us can summon our personas anymore.
Sure, his words are effective, but the song is a very subtle yet extremely effective way of confirming that he is finally learning and resolving his inner turmoil that has afflicted him for years. Maruki is finally letting go of his obsession and venting years of pent-up frustration and false hope. And much like every other occasion in which this song was used, he is also achieving a new level of personal growth by doing the exact opposite of what he wanted and finally facing his issues. But I think perhaps what truly confirmed the fact that he started to move on wasn't Swear to My Bones, but rather the ending. Maruki spends his entire life trying to guide people to where he feels they need to be. Remember, his treasure was a torch, literally guiding people in the darkness to where he wants them to be. A place with no pain, a place with artificial happiness. And once he's done, defeated and has his heart changed, remember what he does? He becomes a taxi driver. To some of you, this may not mean much, but I found it very symbolic. A taxi driver takes clients to where they want to be, not to where the driver thinks they need to be. So how can there be a more fitting profession for a Maruki that's starting anew? He learned from experience that you can bounce back from pain, and he wants to help people in this process. This time, however, it's in a physical sense, by taking them where they want to be. Who knows though? Perhaps we will see Maruki eventually going back to counseling one day, but this time without the whole reality-altering thing. I would like that, I think. I've said a lot, haven't I? Fun fact, this script took, to this point, 3 hours to write. But I'm not done. I saved the most important thing for last. This isn't actually just a video to talk about why Maruki is one of the best antagonists I've ever seen. This video is also sort of my tribute to the life and work of Billy Kametz, the English voice actor for Dr. Maruki. Unfortunately, he passed away in mid-2022, after leaving us with an incredible performance in this game. So many of the lines were incredibly well delivered, and honestly, as a dub player, Maruki would simply not be the same without his voice accompanying him. This is my favorite bit of his performance.
And I believe you called forth your power like this. Persona. I regret not pointing this out to you. You shouldn't mistake our powers as being equal.
I gave up everything! Everything! So why?
So, rest in peace, Billy Kametz. Thank you for the wonderful work that you've done here and in many other series and anime and games. You really did make a difference. And with that, I think that's it. Honestly, there's more to say. There is always more to say. This is a fantastic antagonist and one of the best games ever made in my opinion, so of course I'll always find things to say. But for the sake of my future self, who will have to read and edit all this, I'll cut it short here. I hope, however, that I was able to shed some light on why I enjoy Maruki as an antagonist so much. He may not be the very best antagonist amongst all the antagonists in any game ever, but he's certainly up there for me. He is a character that I won't forget anytime soon. Or late, for that matter. This is clearly a subject I'm very passionate about, so I hope this video was able to do it justice. If you have anything to say, please do leave a comment with your opinions, criticism, anything really. I love to read what you all have to say. And while you're down there leaving the comments, I hope you'll consider clicking like and subscribe, as both actions really help me out. That aside, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Goodbye!
Checkmate.